Bar Association, Madam Yadikon Jai Iribo, Chairperson Tango, Excellency Immaculada Roca Cortesi, Ambassador of the European Union in the Gambia, Excellency Mr. Carl Frederick Paul, UN Resident Coordinator. Good morning. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor and pleasure that we host this National Conference on the Draft Constitution 2024 on the theme Advancing Consensus on the Draft Constitution 2024. The importance of Constitution cannot be overemphasized because it's the legal instrument that ensures legitimacy in a state. And therefore, it's important that there is inclusive consultation and dialogue on the Constitution. Dialogue and consultation are key democratic values which are essential in constitution building process. You will recall that in 2017, the government of the Gambia set up a transitional justice institutions. And this includes the Constitutional Review Commission, the Nhrc, and the National Human Rights Commission. These institutions were set up in line with the aspirations of the Gambian people. And you will recall that on the 22nd December 2020, the draft bill or the draft 2020 Constitution was rejected in the National Assembly after it failed to get the required number of votes to proceed to the third reading and subsequently to a referendum. And this created the need for a national discussion in order to further the constitution building process. And further to this, the government produced a draft in 2020, which has been gazetted on the 14th August 2020. The Nhrc has noted diversity of opinion and views on the Constitution. And in order to ensure that the Constitution does not fail at the National Assembly, the Commission deems it necessary to bring together various stakeholders, including government agencies, CSOs, the media, political parties, human rights activists, CBOs, community-based organizations, together in order to have a discussion on the Constitution, on the draft Constitution 2024. The overall objective of this exercise is to develop a unified position on the 2024 draft Constitution, with specific objectives to discuss the 2024 draft Constitution with the stakeholders, and also to provide a platform for sharing concerns and making suggestions and recommendations on the 2024 draft. And also to identify sticking points in the draft and to promote consensus on them. The expected outputs of this meeting is to have 70 stakeholders on the draft constitution, and also communique to be developed at the end of the discussion, as well as an advisory note to be spearheaded by the Nhrc. Our expected outcome of the whole process is to achieve a consensus on the draft constitution so that it passed the test at the National Assembly. Essentially, this is why we are gathered here today. And without wasting much time, I would now call upon the Honorable Chairperson of National Human Rights Commission, Mr. Emmanuel Daniel Diouf, to come forward and deliver a welcoming remark. Honorable Chair.
Starting a bit late as we were waiting for the participants to come. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think you've made my job easier by doing most of the welcome remarks, the things I wanted to say. So, that said, the Honorable Solicitor General and Legal Secretary, Mr. Hussein Tomasi, representing the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Mr. Daouda Jallow, representative of political parties who are present, the UN resident coordinator being present with us. We have overworked you this week. Our profound apologies, but we thank you for being with us. The EU ambassador and head of delegation of the European Union to the Gambia, head of missions, and members of the diplomatic corps present here, Madam Penda Diba, executive director of the Gambia Bar Association, Madam Yadikun Eribo, chairperson of Tango, representative of, I recognize the presence of the chairperson of the Access to Information, Madam Nene Magdolge. You are most welcome here with us. Representative of civil society, commissioners of the National Human Rights Commission, present, and staff, members of the media. Good morning again, and we thank you very much for honoring this invitation to attend this two-day national convergence under the theme Advancing National Consensus on the Draft 2024 Constitution. You will all recall, as was said by the moderator, that in 2017, following the end of a 22-year dictatorship, the Gambia embarked on a transformative journey of transitional justice reform. And among the pillars of this agenda were the establishment of some key institutions and processes, such as the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission, the Janneh Commission, the establishment of a permanent and independent National Human Rights Commission, a Land Commission, security sector reform, civil service reform, and the judiciary reform initiatives. But central to these reforms was the establishment of the Constitutional Review Commission, which was mandated to deliver a new constitution that reflected the will and aspirations of the Gambian people. This was in recognition of the fact that the 1997 Constitution had serious gaps and inadequacies, especially the absence of a presidential term limit and the fact that it was heavily amended over time at the whims of the former head of state. Some say that it was amended 52 times and probably even more. And this definitely did erode the democratic values and entrench authoritarianism. The CRC worked tirelessly, consulting Gambians at home and in the diaspora. And of course, as was said, in 2020, they delivered a draft constitution that arguably many hailed as a people-centered document. However, despite the widespread anticipation, the 2020 draft constitution was rejected at the National Assembly. This setback was a significant blow to the aspirations of many Gambians who had placed their hopes on a new constitution. Since then, the government has reiterated its commitment to constitutional reform. And in August, as was said, 2024, a draft 2024 constitution was gazetted in accordance with section 226 of the 1997 constitution. This definitely reignited national debate. Opinions on the 2024 draft constitution remains divided. While some view it as a positive step forward, others see it as a diluted version of the 2020 draft, expressing concerns about diminished checks and balances and the reduce in public participation and potential governance gaps. This has sparked position papers being written. I've seen many that were written. I think the former president of the Gambia Bar Association, Mr. Tal, even came up with one, and many others did. Of course, workshops were conducted on the subject, debates on the media, and widespread public discourse on the gazetted draft. As an institution mandated to promote and protect human rights, the Nhrc, under Section 12 of its Act, is empowered to organize seminars, workshops, and conferences on issues of national importance. Our main objective, as was stated in organizing this national convergence, is to promote dialogue and advocate for laws and policies that uphold human rights, accountability, and good governance, including a constitution that reflects the aspiration of the Gambian public. Ladies and gentlemen, a constitution is more than just a legal document. It is indeed a social contract, a blueprint for national governance, and a safeguard for the rights and dignity of everyone. This convergence, therefore, is an opportunity to bridge divides, address contentious issues, and build consensus. Over the next 2 days, we aim to foster dialogue among diverse stakeholders, identify the contentious provisions in the 2024 draft, and develop actionable recommendations to strengthen the draft and secure its adoption. Perhaps it's a tall order, but we will try. As we engage in these discussions, let us reflect on the lessons from the rejected 2020 draft constitution and work collectively to ensure that this 2024 draft does not meet a similar fate. Let us strive to foster understanding, find a common ground, and make compromises where necessary, always keeping the best interests of the Gambia at heart. I urge all of us to engage passionately, yet constructively. We may agree or disagree, but our collective goal should be to develop a unified position that lawmakers can seriously consider. It is them that we have to convince. So our communique will be directed at National Assembly members, and let us make them know that we are all waiting for them and that they have a very important decision to make. The ball will be on their court, but let us do our job. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to a friendly, I think the operative word here is friendly and fruitful deliberation. Constitutional making evokes a lot of passion, but I'm sure we'll have our deliberations constructively. And I thank you all again for honoring this invitation, and I look forward for a fruitful deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I think you have hit the nail on the head. You have actually summarized the essence of our gathering today. You cited that Constitution is not only a legal document, but also a social contract. And the essence of the meeting here is to bridge, divide, and also promote consensus to strengthen the draft and learn from lessons of the 2020 rejected draft. And as the chair put it, this requires compromise and constructive discussions. So essentially, the chair has arrogated a diplomatic role to Nhrc. Thank you very much for that. We would like to acknowledge the support received from the European Union through UNDP for this program to be held. Thank you very much. At this point, I would now like to call upon Madam Penda Diba, Executive Director, Gambia Bar Association, to come forward and make a statement. Thank you.
Honorable Solicitor General and Legal Secretary, Mr. Hussein Tomasi, representing the Honorable Attorney General and Minister for Justice, my learned brother and Chairperson of Nhrc, Mr. Emmanuel Juf, Chairperson of Tango, Yadikonjai Erubu, the Executive Secretary of the Nhrc, Dr. Gassama, Her Excellency Ambassador Immaculada Cartes, the EU representative to the Gambia, Mr. Carl. Oh, you're not hearing me. Thank you. Mr. Carl Frederick Paul, United Nations, that's the right one, yes. Thank you. I think most of them the shortest person in this room, so there you go. Ambassador, Her Excellency Ambassador Immaculada Cartes, the EU representative to the Gambia, Mr. Carl Frederick Paul, United Nations Resident Coordinator, Your Excellency, the ECOWAS Ambassador to the Gambia. I will also like to recognize the Deputy High Commissioner, British High Commissioner, my learned colleague and executive member of the Gambia Bar Association, Mr. Salyu Tal, Commissioner Nene McDolgay, ladies and gentlemen, all other protocols respectfully observed. The constitution of any nation serves as its legal backbone, reflecting its values and guaranteeing the rights and freedoms of its citizens. As we deliberate on the draft Constitution 2024 under the theme Advancing National Consensus on the draft 2024 Constitution, it is essential to highlight its roles in promoting and safeguarding democracy, justice, and equality. I am sorry, I'm also hearing the next room, so it's difficult. Sorry. On the 14th of August 2024, members of the Gambia Bar Association received the draft 2024 Constitution electronically through one of its members. This without prior consultation by the executive with stakeholders. This unilateral action departed from the spirit of inclusivity and transparency that marked the 2020 draft process, raising significant concerns among stakeholders. While we commend efforts to replace the 1997 Constitution, the absence of a broader consultation undermines the legitimacy of the draft and the principles of participatory governance. The changes made to the 2020 draft Constitution were introduced without engaging key entities like the Gambia Bar Association. Such a departure from transparent practices compromises the integrity of the constitutional process and cast doubts on whether the revised draft adequately addresses the aspirations of Gambians. In its press release dated the 19th of August 2024, the Gambia Bar Association expressed concerns over the government's unilateral approach, stressing that such fundamental documents must undergo thorough engagement with all stakeholders to ensure their credibility and alignment with democratic principles. The Constitution must go beyond mere codification of laws. It must enshrine and protect fundamental rights as inherent, universal, and indivisible. These rights are not privileges, but entitlements rooted in human dignity. The Gambia Bar Association reiterates that rights must be safeguarded. Mechanisms must ensure these rights are protected from arbitrary suspension or infringements. Justice and equality must prevail. The Constitution should guarantee access to justice and promote equality and dignity for all. Democracy and the rule of law. The Constitution must ensure no one, including government officials, is above the law, fostering accountability and respect for human rights. In conclusion, as we navigate this national dialogue, the foundational principles of inclusivity, transparency, and participation must guide discussions. The Constitution's purpose is to reflect the collective will of the people, serve as a robust framework for governance, and uphold the rights and freedoms of all Gambians. It is only through a transparent and collaborative process that we can achieve a constitution that embodies these ideals and fosters a just and democratic society. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Madam Diba. She emphasized the role of the Constitution in promoting and safeguarding democracy, and also alluded to the absence of broader consultation during the process of the 20.
Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I stand before you today with a deep sense of purpose and responsibility as we convene on this national conference on the draft Constitution 2024, themed Advancing National Consensus on the Draft Constitution 2024. This gathering is not just an event, it's a crucial step towards shaping the future of our beloved nation, the Gambia. Since 2017, as we all know, we have been on a transitional journey and embarking on robust reform to ensure that mistakes of the past do not repeat again. Of all the reforms we have embarked on, our transitional justice process, the need for a new constitution is the backbone in the consolidating of all the gains we have made. The need for a robust, inclusive, and representative constitution has never been more urgent. Following the rejection of the draft 2020 Constitution by the National Assembly, we find ourselves at a crossroads. The rejection was a sharp reminder of the complexity involved in nation building and the necessity for a constitutional framework that truly reflects the will of the people. A constitution is the bedrock of any democracy. It establishes the principles and values that guides our government and protects the rights of every citizen. It is essential for promoting national unity and fostering trust among our diverse communities. The previous draft 2020 Constitution through the Constitutional Review Commission, the CRC, was a significant step towards embodying aspirations for a more democratic, accountable, and equitable society. Its rejection was disappointing, but it also offers us an opportunity, that is an opportunity to engage, aspirations for a more democratic, accountable, and equitable society. Its rejection, I'm losing my, this is the essence of democracy, to listen, to learn, and to forge a path forward together. In this process, the role of civil society cannot be overstated. We are the voice of the people, the advocates for transparency and accountability. Despite our concerns regarding the process of the reintroduction of the draft constitution, civil society stands ready to contribute positively. We are committed to ensuring that this process is inclusive, participatory, and reflective of the Gambian populace's views. It is essential that we address the apprehensions surrounding this initiative and work collaboratively to build a constitution that resonates with the hopes and aspirations of all citizens. While we acknowledge the changes ahead, it is vital to remember that our collective efforts can lead to a document that not only safeguards our rights, but also empowers us to shape our destiny. This is a moment of reaffirmation to reaffirm our commitment to democratic principles and to work towards a constitutional framework that promotes social justice, equality, and respect for human rights. I urge all stakeholders, government representatives, political parties, civil society, and others present here to engage constructively in this process. Let us set aside our differences and focus on a common goal of reviewing this draft and its content in advancing our democracy. It is time to foster an atmosphere of dialogue and collaboration where every voice is valued, every opinion is considered. Together, we can create a constitution that truly reflects the diversity and richness of the Gambian experience. As we embark on this important journey, I would like to take a moment to express our sincere gratitude to the National Human Rights Commission for convening this important conference. Your dedication to facilitating this dialogue is commendable and plays a crucial role in promoting human rights and democratic governance in the Gambia. Your leadership is bringing us together today, underscores the importance of collaboration in the constitutional development process. In conclusion, let us approach this conference with an open mind and a commitment to the principles of inclusivity and consensus. Together, we have the power to shape the future of our nation, ensuring that it is rooted in justice, equality, and respect for the rights of all Gambians. We look forward to our discussions as we strive to advance national consensus on the draft Constitution 2024. I thank you.
Madam Ambassador and Head of Delegation of the European Union to the Gambia, Mrs. Immaculada Roca y Cortes. Madam Ambassador of the West Africa, the ECOWAS, Mrs. French. Chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission, Mr. Emmanuel Diouf. The Executive Director of Tango, Madame Eribo, and different representatives of civil society and different commissioners of the National Human Rights Commission, Executive Director of the Gambia Bar Association, Mrs. Diba, and dear colleagues of the United Nations, esteemed partners from political parties, fellow friends of the Gambia, I am pleased to join you today to underline a process that is fundamental to human progress, the power of dialogue, the strength that comes from listening to each other, and the wisdom that is found in common ground, understanding our differences and acting on our commonalities in order to find consensus and move forward. Throughout history, here in Africa and all of part of the world, societies and nations have grown stronger when one voice did not dominate, when all people did participate and all voices were heard. Progress has been achieved not only through dialogue, but also through consensus building. Understanding has deepened not in silence, but in the respectful exchange of ideas and perspective. The United Nations, they do firmly believe that meaningful, inclusive dialogue is the cornerstone of democratic societies. When people come together, as you are doing today, to share their hopes, their concerns, and their vision of the future, they weave stronger the social fabric, whether on simple matters or advancing or on matters that are advanced, such as key policy making, or the exchanges on a social contract, such as the Constitution. They build bridges of understanding that can withstand the storms of disagreement. Today, the National Human Rights Commission has convened this gathering to discuss the proposed new Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia. This dialogue represents the best tradition of democratic discourse. Furthermore, a constitution serves as the fundamental legal framework of any nation, directly influencing the safeguarding of civil liberties, political rights, economic rights, and social justice. But the constitution represents also the aspirations of all parts of society. It is therefore imperative and important that in such discussions there is meaningful participation of vulnerable and often marginalized or even underrepresented groups. Also, the ownership will also contribute to long-term peace and guarantee that legal reforms are fully representative. In this regard, I therefore commend the National Human Rights Commission for ensuring the presence today of a wide range of stakeholders, including government officials, civil society leaders, religious authorities, youth representatives, women groups, and many more. Each of these groups bring a unique perspective, and each of the voices do count and they do matter. As you engage today in this important discussion, I encourage you to truly listen to each other, to respectfully debate and accept different perspectives and agree on a way forward so no one is left behind. Behind every perspective is a person. Behind every opinion is an experience. Behind every position is a pursuit that they believe is best for the nation. The United Nations stand ready to support such inclusive dialogue processes by championing the principles of inclusion, mutual respect, and peaceful discourse that have proven essential for national development worldwide. I also extend my gratitude to all the member states here present and to our development partners group, and particularly to the European Union for providing the financial support to this project, and also to the National Human Rights Commission for their leadership. Let me end with a very simple thought that the measure of a success of any society is not in the absence of disagreement. Disagreement is actually normal. But it is in how we bridge our differences through dialogue and mutual understanding. Therefore, I thank you very much and I wish you very fruitful discussions.
The government, the political parties, civil society associations, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly and respectfully observed. I am very pleased to gather here with you today to launch the stakeholders' convergence on advancing national consensus on the draft 2024 Constitution. Let me start by commending the Commission for organizing it, first of all, for taking the initiative, for putting everybody together and Carl has already mentioned a lot the goods of dialogue and the diversion of opinions being expressed. Thank you to all of you, because actually you have been mobilized and you are here. And I think that shows as well the expectancy that the civil society and the Gambians have for these endeavors. I want as well to commend the President of the government, representative of the government by the Solicitor General, because I think it's important that your presence is an unambiguous and encouraging sign of openness, or actually saying that you, as part of the government, you are still engaged in this dialogue. You are all committed in making your contribution to a long-awaited new constitution, to enable that the text, built on a strong consensus and abiding the highest democratic standards, can be voted in the National Assembly and eventually adopted through a referendum. A lot has been said about constitutions. The constitution is the model of all reforms. It is vital to fully implement the country's key democratic changes. The constitution represents the backbone of the country's political organization. It is the rule book of the state, the political framework that shapes and steers the country's future. Allow me to share here personal experience. I was myself born under a dictatorship. It was a military general that ruled Spain for 40 years. I was fortunately enough to, as a child, live as well and witness the democratic transition that started in 1975. It took Spain 3 years to go from that date to have a new constitution. But if you count the time of the Constitutional Assembly, it was 1 year. This text, it was basically the compromise of all the political parties. It was a hard national consensus around it. It was the first time that it was not a document that had been imposed by one single party. It paved the way of Spain's robust democratization and economic development and allowed the country to become one of the key members of the European Union. Almost half a century has passed, during which the Constitution has enabled Spain to remain stable and united. Of course, this is one example of many others, but it's dear to me, and in any case illustrates very much the importance of a long-standing, solidly adopted constitution that enhances democracy, development, and stability. Coming back to Gambia, and I will not repeat all the processes that has been mentioned, but just to say that since 2017 there has been various rounds of consultations that have held in run up to today's rounds. Nevertheless, after the gazetting of the constitution, it's been clear that there are still lots of voices demanding more debate, additional reflections, new inputs, suggesting new amendments, on having specific provisions that have to strengthen the latest draft that it's now in front of the National Assembly. Institutionally, it's clear, the ball is now in the National Assembly. But politically, it is still time to enrich the ongoing democratic process. The Constitution is the most sovereign law in its very essence. And I want to be very clear here, as a partner and a friend of the Gambia, the European Union has never and will never mingle with the content of the Constitution. We have been very happy and very honored to be able to accompany, to support the process, to allow you to have a full-fledged Gambian-owned democratic aspiration. All stakeholders, from His Excellency the President, the government, civil society, citizens, you want a new constitution, to which His Excellency the President Barrow has been continuously committed ever since the Coalition Manifesto of 2016. It is in its path to establish the Gambian as a beacon of democracy and human rights. Reforming the Constitution represents indeed a cornerstone and essential step. I hope, on behalf of the European Union, that today's events in addition to all the complementary and similar events coordinated efforts done by other institutions like Tango, Gambia Participates, other civil society organizations, will facilitate building a strong consensus for a new Gambian-owned constitution upholding the highest democratic standards. I wish you and I take your words, a chairperson, passionate, friendly, and fruitful exchanges, which are highly important. Because if the process succeeds, it will be a major page of modern Gambian history that will be written very soon ahead. Good luck. Thank you very much.
Commissioner here present, members of the diplomatic corps, the chairperson of Tango, Madam Yadiko Njai Eribo, Madam Penda Diba, Executive Director, Gambia Bar Association, Honorable Madi Sise, Chairperson of the National Assembly Committee on Human Rights and Constitutional Affairs, the Honorable Nene McDowell-Gay, Chairperson of the National Access to Information Commission, Honorable Khalifa Salah, former member of the National Assembly here in our midst, representatives of political parties, Professor Opadare, Dean of the Faculty of Law, University of the Gambia, members of the press, members of civil society organizations here present, members of the security services, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure on my part to be here this morning to represent the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Justice, the Honorable Dawda Jallow, on this very important occasion. The Honorable Minister would have loved certainly to be here in your midst this morning, but unfortunately is presently out of the jurisdiction and actually has instructed me that I should not fail this occasion. At the moment, we have a very important seminar that's taking place just next door with the United Nations Peace Building Commission. But because of the significance of this event, I decided to start my day here. And let me first of all start by commending the Honorable Chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission for always being so proactive and actually for putting together this important event. Thank you very much, and thanks also to the partners who have supported you in this process. Let me first start by saying that, yes, it's been reiterated here that there was a Constitutional Review Commission that after 18 months and after widespread consultations delivered a draft constitution. That is certainly true. And if you all recall, this draft was presented to the National Assembly, where actually it did not pass. The draft passed its first reading, but unfortunately was rejected in the second reading, with a vote of 31 in favor and 23 against. There were points of contention when the draft was presented, certainly, and they included the term limits for the presidency, more significantly, the retroactive clause that was in the Constitution. There were issues relating to citizenship, process of impeaching the president, matters relating to judges, as well as to justiciability of the economic rights that were in the Constitution. So there were certainly contentious issues that were raised at the level of the National Assembly. As highlighted here by previous speakers, the rejection of the draft constitution highlighted deep political divisions between those who supported the draft and those who opposed it. What did the government do after the rejection of the draft? We did not sit by idly. In response to the impasse that took place at the National Assembly, the government, together with International IDEA, which is the Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, started a process of mediating on the draft constitution, a very elaborative and consultative process that involved all political party leaders, all political parties, civil society organizations, religious leaders, community leaders, and various facets of women organizations and youth groups. This mediation process involved several rounds of consultations. And despite all these processes, some of the contentious issues still remain outstanding. The 2024 Constitution Bill that we now have that we have gazetted reflects the outcome of these mediation efforts and incorporates adjustments based on the lessons learned from the failed CRC draft. It represents a new attempt to create a constitution that can garner the necessary support in the National Assembly and be endorsed by the Gambian people. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the bill we have aims to establish a legal framework that not only addresses the historical injustices of the past, but also lays a solid foundation for a democratic and prosperous future for the Gambia. It is now more than 3 months, 10 days since we first gazetted the draft that was on the 14th of August, as required under the Constitution. Why do you gazette? You gazette, or the Constitution provides a framework for you to gazette so that there can be consultations before actually deliberation at the level of the National Assembly. This is why there is that provision of 3 days, 10 months, so that Gambians can see transparently what is gazetted and deliberate on it. So, government has accorded the general public the opportunity to see the draft since the 14th of August, so that discussions on it can start. And the draft has been accompanied by a thorough explanatory memorandum to explain the changes that the government has made on the draft constitution. So I generally believe that we have now put forward a situation where we can engage with all facets of society, civil society, political leaders, who deliberate on the draft constitution. And this is essentially why the constitution, that's the 1997 constitution, the present constitution, makes the provision for you to gazette for a very long period. It's not just for gazette's sake, it's to ensure that people see the draft. And for the first time, we did not only gazette through the government mechanism, through the National Printing Office, we also put it on different websites, including the Ministry of Information website, Ministry of Justice website, and widely distributed it so that people could have the opportunity to see the changes that have been introduced on the draft. And undoubtedly, the government has introduced changes. And like I said, these changes have been necessitated based on the fact that consultations have been conducted, and the government felt that what it has now profiled before the general public reflects the discussions that have taken place and what it believed could achieve consensus on Gambians. Having said that, let me state that this conference, Excellencies, undoubtedly sits at the core of a nascent democracy. The conference reflects our collective commitment to charting a new path for our beloved nation, a path rooted in constitutionalism, justice, and democratic governance. The task we have embarked on, or we want to embark on for the next few days, is not merely confined to discussions on a legal document. It is a deliberation on a covenant that binds us as a people, and a discussion on the creation of a constitution that is embedded in constitutionalism. I'll break that word for you. A constitution that is embedded in constitutionalism. Well, we have Professor Opadare here. I'm sure because of the deliberations, those things will come out. Goes beyond words on paper. It represents principles, values, and aspirations guide our nation now and for generations to come. Constitutionalism is the framework that ensures that the rule of law safeguards individual liberties and places the supremacy of the Constitution above all actors and institutions of the state, including, Madam Penadeba, I assure you, government officials too. To speak of constitutionalism is to speak of accountability, equality, and justice. It demands that power is not only conferred, but also constrained. It insists that institutions act within the limits of the law and are subject to checks and balances. In the context of the Gambia's recent political history, where transitions have tested the resilience of our institutions, constitutionalism offers us a safeguard, a promise that the excesses of the past will not define the future. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the 2024 draft that we now have is our opportunity to embed the principles of constitutionalism as it establishes mechanisms that protect fundamental human rights, promote inclusion, ensure accountability and transparency, and uphold the independence of the judiciary and independent institutions that have oversight functions, such as the National Human Rights Commission. The draft embeds constitutionalism by addressing our unique socio-political realities. It ensures the Constitution serves as a safeguard against past abuses while laying a solid foundation for sustainable development, national unity, and democratic resilience. In the words of a renowned constitutional scholar, Giovanni Sartori, and I quote, "Constitutionalism is a culture, a set of attitudes, and a moral compass through which the powers of the state are tamed and directed towards the common good." Quotations close. You will agree it is not sufficient to draft a constitution that enumerates rights and duties. The document itself must establish robust mechanisms to ensure adherence to these principles, which we can all see visibly in the draft document that is now before us and that has been gazetted. Achieving national consensus on the draft constitution is a critical step. A constitution is most effective when it reflects collective will of the people it seeks to serve. Consensus here may not mean unanimous agreement, but it means broad-based acceptance across political, ethnic, and generational lines. It requires dialogue, compromise, and most importantly, trust in this process. And I believe this is the objective of this conference, as has been highlighted by previous speakers. Historically and comparatively, legislators, and in particular I want to focus on our National Assembly, have played central roles in constitutional processes. In South Africa's transition to democracy, the Constitutional Assembly, comprising elected representatives, was tasked with drafting the post-apartheid constitution, reflecting the will of the diverse population. Similarly, Kenya's legislature facilitated the 2010 constitution-making process through extensive public engagement and negotiations within multiple stakeholders. In the Gambian context, the legislature's mandate in constitution building is rooted in its duty to act as a bridge between the state and its citizens. The mandate involves three key dimensions: representation and inclusivity, deliberation and negotiation, as well as accountability and transparency. There will, of course, be challenges. Political polarization, competing interests, and limited capacity can hinder effective constitution making. To overcome this, the legislature must work in close partnership with the public, civil society, constitutional experts, as well as our international partners. Public consultations, expert advisory panels, and education campaigns are essential tools to support the legislature in this process. I wouldn't want to bore you with a very long speech. I believe we have a very elaborate agenda. I think in conclusion, I would just want to state that the task before us is not simply to build a consensus, but to allow a new constitution which is embedded with the spirit of constitutionalism. And as I have highlighted earlier, what constitutionalism is. What are our values? What do we want to see? Fundamental human rights, economic rights, right to health, right to education, and our own fundamental values and national cohesion. These are things that we want to see, and this is why for us nowadays in the spirit of constitution building, we talk of constitutionalism. Let's work hard to see that the constitution, the draft constitution, does not fail before the National Assembly. Let's work hard to see that this nation gets what it wants, a draft, a new constitution. I thank you all for your kind attention, and on behalf of the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Justice, it is my singular honor and of course pleasure to declare this conference open. I thank you all.